Now that you are master of the single engine failure landings, I'm here to challenge you to try one of the most difficult failures out there, a double engine failure on an airline. For this tutorial I will be using the Boeing 787-8. In the previous tutorial I used the 777 because it's the most commonly used airliner in FlightGear. But I'm using the 787 now for two reasons. One is because the plane systems are ahead of the 777 system in FlightGear. And two, because for some reason my FlightGear is broken and will only allow me to use certain planes. And the 777 is not on that list. It's a long story and I won't try to bother you with it in this video. There are many ways to simulate a double engine failure in FlightGear. Some planes, like this 787, will actually simulate the breakdown of engines when you overheat them. But for all planes, the easiest way is to just use the failures menu. That will very likely work for every single plane in FlightGear. So I'm going ahead and disable my two engines right now. Now the first thing you will have to do as the engine failure occurs is making sure your plane is flying stable. If the autopilot is switched on, disengage it and fly manually. On many planes you will lose your instruments or controls because the engines are not providing any electrical power anymore. So make sure you're not on a crash course and then start worrying about the loss of power. Almost always airliners have a so-called ram air turbine, or RAT. You can activate the RAT on the overhead panel of, in this case, the 787, but the position of the switch may vary for other aircraft. This ram air turbine is a propeller that can be deployed from the belly of the plane, and just like a wind turbine, it can provide power to make sure you can still control the plane and to keep the instruments working. But to make sure the instruments keep on working, you will have to switch on the APU, or auxiliary power unit, of the aircraft. So now that you have enough power to control the plane, it is time to find a safe place to bring down the plane onto a flat surface. I don't think it's necessary to tell you that it would be best if that surface were to be a runway. But the Airbus A320 showed that the Hudson River is also an option. Anyways, now is the time for you to do some multitasking. You will have to find a runway while maintaining a perfect gliding flight, while talking to the air traffic controller, while dropping fuel, and all that without freaking out. To make things even worse, it's quite unlikely that you will have a first officer next to you to help you out, as this is FlightGear and not real life. First off, as you can see, I'm trying to keep the 787 straight as possible. I was lucky enough to find a runway ahead of me, because making turns without having engine power will result in a loss of altitude. And altitude is what makes it possible for us to maintain our speed, which makes it possible to maintain our lift. Every plane has a specific gliding ratio, which indicates how far a plane can travel for the amount of altitude it loses. You can look up that ratio to make sure you're flying the most efficient glide as possible. Now that I have my plane on a stable descent to a nearby airport, I can try to drop some fuel. As you may know, every plane has a maximum landing weight. This is because of stall speeds and braking power of the plane. Also, landing a light plane can be easier than landing a heavy plane. So in the overhead panel I can set some switches to drop fuel. You can see if it's working on the outside of the plane or on your fuel displays. So as I'm coming close to the runway now, I'm preparing for approach. I'm lining up to the runway and I'm keeping an eye out for the fuel levels, speed, altitude and distance to the runway. This requires even more practice than, for example, learning how to do crosswind landings. I've never got this perfectly right and I'm not sure if I'm doing exactly what professional pilots would do. But it works, and you know what they say, every landing you can walk away from is a good landing. Actually, I don't agree on that at all. I think it should be every landing you can walk away from was apparently good enough, but maybe that's just me. I think all I can say from here on is good luck. Okay, maybe I can give you some more tips. As you can see, I'm trying to start descending rather late. Descend above the glide slope path and experiment with what works best for each aircraft. After touchdown, you will not be able to use the engine's reversers, quite obviously, so use the normal brakes, speed brakes and flaps to slow the plane down. So good luck practicing your double engine failure landings, and as always feel free to submit them as video responses to this video. I hope you found this rather long tutorial helpful, and stay tuned for more videos coming up on this channel, including new episodes of FlightGear How To.